Lovely. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Shiv Puri, and I'm delighted to welcome you to another one of the In Conversation with. Before we begin, I'd just like to take a moment to thank my wife, Reshma, who's thoughtfully put this whole evening together. Please, a round of applause. Without her, we would not be having this today. Tonight we have the privilege of spending time with, I think, one of the world's leading cognitive scientists, Professor Manu Kapur, who is currently the director at ETH Zurich, which, as many of you know, is one of the world's most prestigious engineering institutes. ETH is ranked, by the way, 7th globally in terms of universities in the world, and it's been the number one in Europe for a very, very long time. It's had 32 Nobel laureates that have graduated, and including their most famous one, Albert Einstein. So our conversation tonight will focus on Professor Kapur's groundbreaking book, right, Productive Failure, Unlocking Deeper Learning Through the Science of Failing. And his research on the power of initial struggle in the learning process is reshaping classrooms and boardrooms around the world. Professor Kapur's work has been featured in Time, NPR, the New York Times, and he's delivered keynotes at prestigious forums such as the World Economic Forum and the Royal Society. So whether you're a student, educator, entrepreneur, or a lifelong learner, I think you'll find this evening full of insights on how to fail when approached with purpose. And that can lead to deeper understanding, creativity, and growth. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming my friend, Professor Manu Kapur. Ready?
Let's go, Shiv. But let me just say thanks too.
Okay.
You know how a dinner conversation just turned into more lunches, and then now we're all here. So thank you, Shiv, too.
Is the mic on? Okay. So, Manu, first question. Most people, whether in parenting, business, or politics, go to great lengths to avoid failure. And yet, you've made it central to your life's work. So let me begin with a simple question. What exactly is productive failure, and how is it different from just failing?
Great question. So the epiphany I had in graduate school was, there's a lot of research that we can potentially learn from failure when it happens. So you make a mistake, maybe you can learn from that failure. Failure naturally happens anyways in life. Some of us learn from it more than others. Some of us don't. In some areas we learn, in other areas we don't. So the epiphany was very simple, that if learning from failure can be such a powerful mechanism, then why do we wait for it to happen? What if we could intentionally design for it? So you're about to learn something new. What if you could intentionally design for failure in your initial learning in a safe way, and then bootstrap that for future learning? Right? And that was basically the idea. Is whenever you're about to learn something new, instead of just telling you what that thing is, which is kind of the default theory and model for learning, let me engage you in kind of activities that are intuitively accessible but very challenging. And the trick is that they're designed for you to fail. That means you will not be able to get to the correct answers or solutions or even the optimal strategies. But as long as you've explored, you've generated ideas and representations and approaches, even if they don't lead to success, that's what prepares you to learn from instruction or an expert or a feedback later on. So it's the combination of designing the initial struggle that leads to failure with expert knowledge, feedback, or instruction. And together, that's what makes failure productive.
Can everyone hear him, by the way, clearly? It's all good?
A little mild,
Yeah, maybe bring it a little closer.
I'll use my teacher voice.
So, but Manu, can you try that? Yeah, some productive failure there, right? Well, that's not the failure he's talking about. That's not productive failure.
This was not intentional.
Can you give us an example of that, of productive failure? It could be something simple, and then of course, I have questions on how we apply it to kids and the work life and just life in general. But can you give us an example of what you're talking about?
So, I mean, much of the research comes from the schooling context and education learning context. And I particularly focus on math because mathematical cognition is abstract. I think it's easy to imagine failure if you're, designing something or building some or playing with Lego and so on and so forth. But when you're dealing with abstract math and you talk to mathematicians, say, there you just have to tell the person what the law is, what the theorem is, what the proof is. And that's where I said, no, even to learn abstract mathematics, we can design problem-solving activities. So these are, we design based on certain principles. And when you look at these activities, you'll say, oh, actually, I think this is an idea for solution. But when you try it, it doesn't work. And then you think, oh, maybe try something else. And that too doesn't work. So for example, let me give you an example from statistics. Suppose I give you a set of data and I say, football strikers or cricket players, perhaps for this crowd, right? Here's a number of runs they've scored over the number of matches. Who's the most consistent batsman of them all, given the number of runs they've scored, right? So you take, maybe you take the average. And when you take the average, we've designed it in a way that the averages are all the same, which means it activates a part of your knowledge. It's very intuitive. But because the averages are the same, you then have to think about something else because it doesn't work. They're all the same. Now, you look at the maximum scores. We also designed them to be the same. So and you start to play around with the data. No matter what you do, you can generate many ideas for who will be the most consistent player, but you're just not able to solve the problem optimally. And that's when you're ready for instruction. Right? In normal parlance, I mean, kids, when they learn language, for example, it's full of these productive failure cycles. They pick up a word, right? And then they engage in conversation and they make linguistic errors. For example, tense. You go, he goed. So they overgeneralize. And that context is the design within which children participate. They fail, they get corrected with some feedback, and they learn as they go. And that's what language acquisition is. It's a series of productive failures built into itself. And there's so many other examples from other fields as well that we could go into.
Now, that's very, very interesting. What about from a neuroscience perspective, right? Because I know when I struggle with something, and I'm in the investment world, nothing is black and white, right? So you're always thinking about things that are in the gray, and you're only trying to get to a point of action. You'll never get to a point of certainty. So from a neuroscience perspective, is it firing new synapses in the brain? Is it doing something for the kids and adults that make them more resilient and makes an impact to them?
Yes. So one of the things that happens when you get frustrated or when you fail, you know that you've not got the solution or there's a lot of uncertainty, is that your emotional network gets to activate. It's the basic primal, the amygdala in you, right? That gets activated. And what that does is it tells your attentional networks to say, pay attention here. There's something going on here. And what the attentional network then says to the processing network, you better solve this. You better compute now. You pay attention. So it directs the attentional network and the processing network, and that's how you encode that new information. Whatever you're doing in that space gets encoded. If you look at your memories, some of your most vivid memories could have very high emotional charge, positive or negative. That's because your attentional networks are activated and you are deeply processing that information. Now, that, like I said at the outset, that happens naturally. Life presents all of these positive and negative roller coasters. What productive failure does is we intentionally design for it.
And what's the science behind that, Manu? You're a scientist. This is a theory you've been, and practice you've been working on for a very long time. You've written an amazing book, and we'll talk about that in a second. But can you share some of the data and the science behind the success of productive failure?
So in terms of the effects on learning?
Yes, on the effects of learning.
So we compare learning from productive failure with traditional instruction. So imagine you're in a classroom. I come in as a teacher and I say, today we're going to learn X, and I tell you what that X is, right? And to this side, the other classroom, I go to the same classroom and say, today you're going to learn X, but you will learn through productive failure, right? And then same teacher, same material, same time, we run these experiments, and I do assessments after. And what we found is that if you compare the knowledge gain on, say, procedures, can you compute stuff? Can you follow a particular procedure? Think a mathematical formula. Can you remember it? Can you compute it? There's no difference between the two groups. So whether you learn through direct instruction, direct telling, lecture, you're about the same as if you learn through productive failure. But when you start to assess who understands it better, whose depth of understanding is deeper, that's when the productive failure group understands that. And most importantly, and this is the holy grail of education, is who can transfer it to novel context. After all, you go to school to learn things so that when life presents novel contexts, you can apply what you've learned, right? And so that application part is where the productive failure students are more significantly better.
And when you say who understands it better, what you're saying is who has a better foundation to build on it.
Yes, I mean, we build on the knowledge that we have. So the deeper, the more integrated the knowledge that we have, it allows us to build more knowledge on top of that.
So what advice would you have for parents, right? I mean, most of us are parents in this room, and, you know, we all want our children to succeed and succeed early. But what you're saying is that there is a long-term cost of shielding kids from protective struggle.
Yes.
Right? So what is that, and how do we design around it?
Let me give you a thought experiment. Okay? Suppose you're all kids who love to play with toys. You're young kids, 3, 4-year-olds, you're playing with kids. Suppose I come to you, this group A, this group B. We're going to do a little bit more of this all evening today, okay? I'm an experimental psychologist, so I love to do this. So in this group A, I come to you and I say, hey kids, imagine, right? This is the new toy. You've never seen it, you've never played with it. Would you like to play with it and figure out how it works? Not very enthusiastic. All right, so I said, fine, okay, I give you the toy and say, play for as long as you like, and figure out how it works. And I go to this group, right? I say, hey kids, same toy. Here's a new toy, you've never seen it, you've never played with it. Would you like to play with it? Yeah. A bit more enthusiastic. But you haven't learned from this group. Okay, I'm worried about that. Okay, but then I say, wait, this is a new toy, you've never seen it, you've never played with it. Let me show you how it works. Okay, so you watch and learn. I show you. So I show you how it works. You press here, something happens. You do this, something else happens. And say, now that you've learned it, play with it. And I give you the toy. And now observe how you play. Who do you think would be more engaged with the toy? Even though they were not enthusiastic. Right? Who would invent more strategies to figure out how the toy works? Who would play with the toy the way they were showed how to play with the toy? And these are not thought experiments, these are actual experiments in developmental psychology as well, child development and so on and so forth. Right? And the evidence is very clear. This group will be up to three times more inventive with the same thing. Now think of knowledge, ideas, also as toys, but as conceptual toys. And what we do, whether you're parenting or you're in the school or even as an adult, if you think about conceptual toys, then the moment you go straight into showing somebody, oh, here's the toy and here's how it works, it's great. You can play with the toy in the way that you were showed. But a lot of deep understanding and application, because application requires, adapting what you know creatively to new contexts. It's the group that first gets to play, first gets to figure out on their own, and then gets shown how the toy works. That combination is the most powerful. Now, you can apply that, like I said, if your child is struggling or playing or struggling with math or science or whatever homework, you can easily design these situations, right, where you give the child a safe space to figure out things on their own and not rush into telling them what it is. They may not like it, but that is okay. I tell my students, even at ETH, who are very smart students, my job is not to make you happy, my job is to make you learn. Right?
Excellent. And I want to take that conversation to organizations as well. But before I do that, in just the academia world, we have some folks from academia here. Let me ask you a little broad question. If you were to design a national curriculum around productive failure, where would you start? And what's the first thing in teaching today that you would stop? And would love to get some things that, perhaps schools or educational institutions can actually implement that's not too expensive, that doesn't require massive training, doesn't require massive tech.
I mean, my general aim as a scientist is to bring pedagogy as close to science of learning as possible. Right. So we have colleagues from the Ministry of Education here. We've scaled productive failure into the junior college stats curriculum more than 10 years ago. And there we developed the curriculum, we trained the teachers, we went into the classroom to carry out those implementations. Now, because designing for productive failure is a very high level of expertise, yes, we scaled it in a limited way, but real full scaling is very hard. Until recently, until the GenAI models came along. Right. Now, with those, we can literally supercharge both the design of these activities, how you design, we can train them on the data that we already have. So imagine now teachers and maybe directly to students have access, or will have access if you're done, when we are done with this, will have access to really powerful, scientifically sound learning models that give up to 3 times the effects compared to other models, supercharged by AI that can personalize their learning in the right ways.
Mm. But isn't AI kind of moving it in the opposite direction, which is, now it's just so easy to go to ChatGPT. I mean, I spend an hour or two on ChatGPT a day. I'm sure all of you do it in some generative AI engine.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're killing the earlier synapses that we have.
So I mean, it depends how you design, how you train it, and what principles is the interaction with the AI. So if you go to the generative AI model, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and you ask it for something and it gives you the answer, well, you have not learned anything per se. I mean, okay, if you get them to write something, get it to write something, the model has written it, not you. Now, as an expert who already has a lot of expertise, it can amplify your productivity, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the question you have to ask is if you're learning something new, so for a novice who's about to learn, if they rely on ChatGPT or these models, the effort is coming from the model, not from the learner. And to the extent that the effort is never placed on the learner, you're basically shooting yourself in your own foot. So a big part of productive failure until the AI models came along is that we remove access to these tools when we engage them in these activities.
Yeah, that's an important point, right? A lot of this is applicable to somebody who's starting their learning journey. Like it's more someone who's a novice, but we're all novices in some subject, right? We might be experts in something or well-heeled in something, but we still have areas that we're trying to learn.
Exactly.
And what you're saying is the struggle on that learning is very important from a foundational perspective.
Exactly, and we all have, so what I make a distinction between, we all have learning goals and performance goals, right? So if performance goals is where you have your expertise in whichever domain you have, and you want to exploit that. So if you're a surgeon and we have surgeons in the room, you want to do your surgery, you want to do it flawlessly. My God, I don't want my surgeon to be very experimental with the toys. Huh? So, same for investment. I want my investment manager to really do a good job, and so on and so forth. That's the performance zone. High success is expected and should be delivered. But then there is a learning zone. We all have our different learning zones as well. If you can clearly define that, and there if you operate as though you're operating in the performance zone, you're going to learn 0. But there you can design using productive failure and say, I'm in my learning zone. I need to design for struggle. I need to try things by myself first, build a safe, resourceful environment around me, have access to some expertise or knowledge which is readily available these days. And that's how you go about learning new things. Yeah.
So I want to shift the conversation a little bit to companies and organizations, right? As an entrepreneur, I've observed one thing which one of my role models, Charlie Munger said, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. Mm-hmm. And that is, incentives to me are one of the most powerful things in the world. Mm-hmm. It's, we're designed as human beings to respond to incentives. Mm-hmm. So how do you design incentives within an organization in a world that's designed for speed and immediate results and instant gratification? I mean, it's great to have this concept, but a company needs to deliver near-term results. So how do you balance this? How do you design for this?
Look, at the senior leadership, that's a very critical question. What part of the efforts as a company is focused on immediate near-term profits? And what part is designed to explore the space where you can build new products, new innovations that can potentially position you for the future? If your entire focus as a company is on the near-term metrics, right? Success, profits, blah, 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 then yes, that's good. But somebody else may come along and just completely wipe you out of the business, right? So, and that's in economics or behavioral economics, there's the exploration exploitation hypothesis, right? So every company, different sectors have a good balance. Yes, you need to exploit your competencies, your capabilities to deliver profits and so on and so forth. But at the same time, you need to have exploration-based work, R&D, innovation within the company that are exploring new strategies, new approaches, new products. And even there, if you go and visit them and say, well, all these products are working really well, they're still not pushing the boundaries then.
So you need almost products that are failing consistently to know, for designed for productive failure, not for
You need to have the failure signal. I need to see the failure signal. So when I'm looking at whether it's PhD students trying new ideas, to companies trying new products, to innovation labs, generating new sort of, instruments or technologies, I look for where the failure signal is.
Yeah.
And it's not, you don't get the failure signal because you're chasing failure. You get the failure signal because you're pushing for something beyond.
Yeah.
It's really challenging. So that's just a byproduct. But if I don't see that byproduct at all, that means you're not pushing hard enough. Yeah. And that becomes a metric.
Yeah, I see that a lot in the largest technology companies in the world, which are in Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. Over the last 10 or 15 years, there was a school of thought in the investing world, by the way. You stay focused, right? If a company is like Coca-Cola, they're making Coca-Cola, you stay focused, those are the best companies. But what you've seen in the last 10 or 15 years, wealth creation has happened in companies that have done exactly that, I think. Tried new things, where they've pushed the boundary of technology, whether it's in cloud or it's in the GPUs or it's in different areas. And many of them have failed. We know the ones that have worked. But they've made these organizations a lot more resilient, mm-hmm. I think, and innovative. So, one of the things that I also want to talk to you about is, in my own experience, I found that some of the best insights that I've got in anything is by combining ideas across different disciplines. Mm-hmm. And for me, my favorite three are, history, philosophy, and systems thinking. I think they've taught me more about, I'm an investor, so they've taught me more about that than, any statistics or finance or any formula that can happen. Do you think productive failure can promote the same kind of integration, helping learners connect, not just memorize? So you connect the big ideas of different disciplines, through pushing the boundary in productive failure?
Short answer is yes, and here's why. Because when I put you into a situation where you're trying to solve a problem that requires knowledge that you haven't learned yet, the only resource you have is your prior knowledge and experiences, right? And if the problem is intuitively accessible, then I'm activating your intuitive resources in a very wide way. That means you're really forced to pick all you can from all aspects of your experiences and bring them to the table and say, maybe this idea from philosophy works, maybe this idea from math works, and maybe this idea, let me pull that all together. Because your search burden is very high because you don't have the knowledge. So if I give you a problem in algebra, you already have the knowledge, you would go very directly, you search for that knowledge and you apply to solve that problem. But if you don't know it, your search burden is very high. You've got to look for all different kinds of ideas. So it forces the connection between different parts of your knowledge structures. So if you have sort of whatever experiences you have, whether it's philosophy, mathematics, statistics, finance, systems thinking, if you're in that situation, you'll find that your mind is searching through all of these. What can I use to potentially solve this problem, right? And if you do, and that's part of the struggle, that's part of the initial failure. And once you've done that, that's when you're ready to basically learn the correct thing.
Okay, interesting. So just continuing on that theme, are there any leaders, whether in politics or business or or even in the nonprofit world or in academia, who you believe was shaped by the kind of productive failure you described that we would know?
Yeah, look, by failure, definitely. So I talk about that in the book. If you look at high level of expertise in any domain, right? Whether it's athletics, whether it's politics, whether it's in the industry, whether it's in entertainment, so on. High level of expertise, you will find a lot of failure. I was talking to one of my colleagues at ETH, who's a Fields, one of those 32 Nobel laureates, but Nobel laureate in math, which is called a Fields Medal. And we were talking about how he does math. And, and we're talking about productive failure. And he says, Manu, the 95% of the ideas that I have when I try to approach mathematics or try to solve these unsolved mathematics problems, they don't work. 95%. So I said, that's a lot of failure. This is good fodder for my book. But that's a lot of failure, 95%. I said, how do you deal with it? I says, well, you need to know what does not work so that you can get to what does, because it gives you ideas for adapting, improving, connecting with other fields as well. So that's a whole lot. If you look at athletes, Michael Jordan, he's missed more than he's made. Even the top batsmen and baseball players, for example, their success rates with hitting is actually dismal, right? It's very low. If you even just look at the enterprise of science, what gets published, and my academic colleagues will back me up on what gets published is a very tiny minuscule of what makes it through to the review process. But even before the experiments actually have to work, and then they get. Even when they actually get published, so for example, when I first published my first paper, which took 2 years to publish, scientists don't go and say, oh, great, you've shown this, let's believe Manu in productive failure from now on. They say, wait, I'm going to try to prove you wrong. I'm going to replicate your result in my context, and I'm going to prove you wrong. So they try to prove me wrong. But when they try, if they can't, that means there's another evidence, independent data points that support. So they try to fail me. Another lab tries to fail me, let's put it that way, colloquially. They too fail. So what we call as the best theory at any particular time is really a series of failure. When repeated attempts to fail a model fail, that's when you start to talk about, oh, there is something there. So it is, just to cut the long story, it is endemic. It's part of every process that leads to very high level of expertise. And science to me is the biggest, the most instrumental invention of mankind.
Well, you scientists are a happy bunch. You just want the other to fail and keep moving.
Look, we go out, we parties. They can't see, they're supporting me as well. But it's a dispassionate kind of attachment to what we have.
Yeah. So, one of the other areas when I was researching your book, Productive Failure, that it reminded me of was, I've long been a student of Roman philosophy, especially the Stoics, right? And, one of my favorite philosophers, a guy called Seneca, and he says, it's not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It's because we do not dare that they are difficult, right? So would you say productive failure is a scientific expression of that Stoic insight? That adversity, if designed well, leads to deeper growth and resilience? Did that Stoicism ever play a part in sort of how you went about this?
I think I would say productive failure is difficult even if you dare. Right? So it's not one or the other, okay? It's difficult even if you dare. And the problem, and the proposition is that you must dare, knowing that it is difficult.
I think but the question that still comes back, when you're looking at big institutions or even entrepreneurial firms, what is the next step? Like, what should, a CEO do next? What should a leader of an academic institution do next? What should the MOE do next? What should people do next to push this forward if the data is so clear? Mm-hmm. Because the way things are structured, whether it's academia, you're taking a test, you have to do well on it. The student wants to do well on it. Mm-hmm. If you're in business, you want to hit this quarter's numbers or next quarter's numbers. Mm-hmm. So it's fine to say that, we'll do all of this stuff and we want to try and fail productively and build resilience. But practically, what are the 4 or 5 things that leaders can do?
Define goals. Like, it goes back to the conversation around you need to know what your goals are and what set of goals do you have. If you only have, like I said, performance goals, then you'll go down a particular track. If you have learning and innovation goals, then you'll also balance those with that. And it's not just about goals. Then comes how do you design the tasks and the activities and the portfolios of your teams, of your employees, right? If the goals are somewhat balanced or more leaning towards performance versus learning or learning versus performance, then you'll design those portfolios and tasks accordingly, right? You will design the incentives. So back to your question about, again, if you're only looking for success, how much profit, how much sales did you bring for the company, or how many ideas did you try? What did you try that did not work? Where is your failure signal, right? So again, it goes back to incentives. And then you have to build the culture. Right? So if your organization and other people have written about it, right? Psychological safety and so on and so forth. So you've got to build the culture. So as senior leaders or management teams, you have sight of all of that. And you can steer using those things about goals, about designing the portfolios, about designing the incentives and creating the culture. And you can steer the organization in very different ways depending on how you position yourself and communicate on those goals.
Yeah, wonderful. By the way, guys, I have a few more questions and then I'm going to open it up. So I hope you guys are thinking of questions to ask him as well. So, one of the things that, and this is a bit of an offbeat kind of question, right? I actually just thought about it an hour and a half ago, so it may not connect. But if you look at America today, right? And you look at America's history, from whether it's the Great Depression to the Vietnam Wars or the Iraq Wars, from Watergate to the global financial crisis, even the withdrawal of Bretton Woods, when one fine day they woke up and said, our dollar is not hinged on the gold standard anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, if anybody studies history, by the way, this tariff war is very uncertain, very unpredictable, seems out of the blue. But if you looked at what happened in the 70s, it was way worse. But yet, America, every time so far, has bounced back stronger, whether it's through innovation or reinvention or reinvestment. And so the question I have is, do you see the American story itself as a kind of macro level example of productive failure, in that where failure, when met with reflection and redesign, actually fuels further progress?
Yeah, in that sense, what Mr. Trump is doing right now is intentionally designing for failure, really testing his institutions and the world order, hoping that it'll
Nixon did that too, right? And so did Roosevelt.
So maybe he's read my book. I God knows.
I don't think he's read anything. I don't think he's read anything. I think he's only read about how to get a nice fancy plane.
Yeah, and he's got one. No, look, again, it goes back to me, yes, maybe there are several systems out there, let's just put it, from like building strength and fitness to vaccination and immunology to design to entrepreneurship, where there are elements of productive failure, you can find them. The question here really is, were they intentionally designed for, right? And so if what the idea behind productive failure is not that failure is welcome and you embrace it, is can you actively design for it? If you go back to the points in history that did failure happen because failure happens? Or was there a deliberate attempt to sort of throw people off, throw systems off and watch them calibrate, right? It's like what happens in, say, muscle training or fitness training, right? You go to the gym, and you deliberately push yourself to failure. Literally, at that level, the microfibers of your muscles start to rupture. But then you give the body enough time to recover and come back. So you come out stronger 24 to 42 hours later, right? So you deliberately push it, it fails, you have the dip, and then you come out stronger. Whether this was deliberately done in history, sometimes yes, sometimes no, and to the extent that it was, then it's productive failure in some by way of analogy.
Got it. So one of my final questions is: you began developing this idea nearly 2 decades ago. Is it a decade ago? 2 decades ago? So if we're having this conversation, 5 or 10 years from now, what do you hope will have changed most in the way how the world views failure?
Oh, wow. if I
I
could
haven't
change
given any of these questions before, even though we had lunch earlier this week.
No, yeah, exactly. If I could change, um, huh. To me, I mean, if first is a mindset shift, right? If we can, the theory is so new. It's only 2 decades, and 2 decades of science is a very new, like it's literally nothing, right? And so if in the next few years we can already start to change mindsets so that people start to understand it's not just about failure, but how you design for it and how you can bootstrap that for learning and growth and in a number of areas, that would be phenomenal. But I want to take the specifics of my work, which is more in the context of human learning and education, to really now take this, design technologies, build applications, and bring this powerful method with AI from that student in rural Africa working on a mobile phone to somebody sitting in Delhi to somebody in Tokyo or in the US, regardless of where you are, you can have access, personalized access to powerful learning models with AI. And if I can do, and we can do that, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years.
Fantastic.
Easily.
Okay, I hope you guys have thought of some questions to ask him. But before we get there, I thought we'd have a quick, fun rapid fire round. Share my fun, but we have a rapid fire.
Let's do that.
Yeah? I'll tell you what, I'll join in as well. Okay, I know the questions. I had a lot of productive failure designing them because I went to ChatGPT and I asked them what's the 5 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So I went through my productive failure.
Go for it.
But here are the questions, okay?
Okay.
And I'm going to think of the answers well when I ask you. What's more important, curiosity or discipline?
Curiosity.
Okay, I say the same, curiosity, because I think discipline follows, right?
Yeah.
Okay, which emotion is most underrated in learning?
Frustration.
Why?
Oh, that I don't know, because people just don't like to be frustrated. Frustration is something that makes you give up, right? And so if you can learn to manage frustration and frame it in a positive way, I even tell yourself that, oh, I'm struggling and I'm getting frustrated with this. Instead of telling you, this is not for me, say, I am in the zone where this is good. This is to be expected.
Yeah. I would say something similar. I think, frustration, confusion, because that helps you distill it down, complex stuff into something simple.
Right.
Third, if productive failure were a sport, what would it be?
All sport. Right. As in this, I'm an ex-athlete. I know this. We have ex-athletes here. Productive failure is at the heart of. If you haven't had a trainer or a coach who pushes you, this is what it is. This is. I mean, we don't call it productive failure, but let's start doing so.
Okay. So I'd say something like maybe rock climbing, where it's a struggle, but there is support system designed around. Okay. What's a failure that secretly made you proud?
Secretly.
Yeah.
Then I have to reveal your secret.
Yeah.
I think having your, and this is kind of part with me as a parent, both with my elder son and now with my younger son. Playing with them in ways that gets them to, struggle a little bit. I remember, at least, and I think I tell the story in the book, especially with my elder son. He was learning how to count. And I would grasp his fingers, because they would use fingers to count. And I would grasp his fingers and I said, no, you've got to compute, man. And, he was falling behind in class in the kindergarten, where they were starting to do number systems. And he was falling behind. But one day he got it. And then he could do it faster than anybody. I'm not suggesting you try this at home. It just worked out. Maybe it was lucky. But secretly, actually, that was one of my initial hypothesis testing. And any good psychologist does that to their kids.
That's right. Failure that secretly made me proud. I would say, right out of college, I started a job in investment banking, and I think I was pretty terrible at it because it just required a lot of grunt work. And I realized very early on that I'll make a terrible employee. I'm not very good at following instructions in a setting. My wife is shaking her head out here. She's nodding. So that was, I think, secretly made me proud. Okay, next one. What's one thing you failed at that you'd recommend everyone try?
Making eggs? One thing that I failed at that I'd recommend everybody try. I'm not particularly good at many things so I've failed a lot. That's a tough one, Shiv. What's one? I don't know. I'll have to think about this. Nothing immediately comes to mind, but maybe you'll give me some inspiration.
So I was just thinking of this because it happened at the dinner table 2 nights ago. Is try to, as parents, try to use some slang words with your Gen Z kids. You'll get some legendary eye rolls and ickiness. So I recommend you try, even though you fail.
All right.
All right. Last one.
Okay.
What is the one failure in life that taught you the most?
Oh, that's a bit personal.
Chatham House rules.
No, it's just my personal life hasn't been an easy, smooth going aspect. So that has really taught me quite a fair bit. And I think if my partner tells it right, I'm still learning on that front. So, yes.
Well, they're in agreement on some things. Okay. I would say for me, it was more when I was a kid. I used to play competitive golf, and I was reasonably good at it. And then, there's one tournament I was playing that on the last hole, I was a bit overconfident, and I kind of thought that I had it because I'd had it a few times before. And then I realized it ain't over till it's over. So that's what it taught me then. But anyway, our fireside chat is almost over. And before I open it up to some Q&A, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Manu Kapur.
Thank you.
So guys, thank you all for being an engaged and thoughtful audience. This In Conversation series is something, Reshma and I are delighted to do, just to share, knowledge and interesting insights from some of the leaders in the field with our friends. And really our goal is that, if it just sparked one new idea for you this evening, that makes hosting this event absolutely worthwhile. So with that, I'd love to open it up to questions. Rohit, can we get a mic here, please?
I have two quick questions. One being, if you design something for productive failure in the teaching domain, if the subject who you're presenting it to knows that this is the technique you're using, productive failure, or if they don't know, are the outcomes different? Question one. Question two, productive failure is a relatively new terminology that you've brought in. How do you see that interacting, being similar, complementary, whatever you call it, to problem solving?
Mm-hmm. Right. So thank you for those questions. The first case where the students know they're being engaged in productive failure or not. So the answer is yes, there is a difference because you need to have a conversation about why you're doing what you're doing. Because students or learners bring with themselves certain assumptions. That I'm in a classroom, that I'll have certain assumptions that the teacher is looking for the correct answer. If I'm struggling, it's not good for me. This math is not for me or something like that. So you need to change those assumptions very explicitly and tell them, look, I'm going to engage you in a challenging but intuitively accessible exercise. You will fail at it, but that's what I expect. Just focus on generating ideas. And when you tell them that, and you've got to keep at it so that the frame is the right frame, that's when they start to benefit. So there is a big difference, and we do that. Problem solving versus productive failure. Productive failure is a particular kind of problem solving that is intentionally designed to lead to failure. Not all problem solving is of that kind, right? And even within problem solving, you can invoke different kinds of reasoning, for example, inductive, deductive, abductive. There are many aspects to approach. There are different aspects. So there's design problem solving from forward search problem solving. So again, vast range. So problem solving is a very big kind of, from a cognitive science perspective, is a very big umbrella term. Productive failure is a subset of the kind of problem solving designed for you to fail and then learn from that failure.
So is it more experimental, you would say?
Yes, it is. It is. This entire research, by the way, and we didn't talk about it, maybe you can ask me, the entire research is experimental, right? It's experimental effects, one stacked on on top of each other.
So you would say SpaceX is very good at productive failures, right?
That's a great example because it depends how safe it is, right? So if the initial simulation and experimentation, if it's designed in a safe way, then yes, they're learning lots from it. But the NASA disasters, well, those were in the performance zone, right? That's a terrible failure. That's not a productive failure. Shall we just take questions or?
So I hope I fail at this question, by the way. But it's a two-part question. So the first part, I found it very interesting what you talked about, the emotional charge from the limbic brain, shooting up synapses to the prefrontal cortex or wherever the rational part is, so that the memory becomes stronger and the embodied cognition gets stronger. So what happens after time if, as you are confronted with situations of failure in the same scenario? Let's say you go to a spin class and over time your synapses are built, you're like, that's the wrong move, this is the one, and the limbic brain and the prefrontal cortex are assimilating and finally getting used to it. Let's say you become a pro. How immune do you become to this productive failure in that sense?
Very good. Very excellent question. So you completely succeeded at your question. Didn't fail.
Okay,
so I'm
thank
sorry.
God.
Your own
Thank
goal
God.
was not met. You'll have to try again. So a strange thing happens when, with expertise, you develop enough knowledge, both explicit knowledge as well as tacit, deeply internalized knowledge that you don't even know you have it, right? And that gets activated in these situations in a way that sometimes experts can say why they did what they did, and other times they just have no idea. They just say, that's what I did, right? And so in that sense, productive failure then becomes less and less useful for an expert because their ability to integrate new information against the backdrop of their own expertise is so effortless. So if Shiv goes and gives a talk to other investment managers who are deeply experienced, he doesn't have to engage them in productive failure. Maybe, right? But the point is they bring, or let's say Alex Ferguson goes and talks to other EPL managers, or cricket coaches go and talk to other cricket. They can just talk about it because everybody has a very deep understanding and experience and expertise in that domain. You want to use productive failure when you don't have that deep expertise, precisely to build it.
Yes. So it becomes unconsciously ingrained in you.
Exactly.
Right.
And just a tangent to that as well, when you have those emotional connections to failure, you have multiple paths to the same knowledge. A very quick demonstration is like, many of you have introduced each other, right? But that's the wrong way. When you go up to say, hey, I'm so-and-so, you should first guess, are you Anna? And she will say, no, I'm not Anna, I'm Reshma. And she will say, are you Mark? And I say, no, I'm Manu. The failure and the embarrassment that would follow, right?
Yes.
I'm just giving you a very toy example. The next time I have to remember her name, I will have two parts at least. I may directly remember she's Reshma, or I can say, I called her Anna, how stupid she was actually, right? So that's what the encoding through failure actually gives you multiple pathways around your knowledge system as well.
Right.
And that creates multiple retrievals in new situations, so it's all the more powerful.
For a second, I thought you were going back to some of your pickup lines at the bottom. All right, next question.
That may work too.
Professor Kapur, this is great thoughts, and also Shiv, great moderation. I guess my question would be, you've constantly used the phrase "design for failure," so that sort of implies that it's structured, it's planned, it's there's sort of a sense of implementation. How would you differentiate that concept with companies that just have a culture where they accept failure. It's almost an ingrained process of how they innovate. But it isn't as, it's more organic. It's not as pre-planned as you've sort of indicated productive failure needs to be. Is there a difference between how you look at those two aspects?
Yes. So if you look at the history of design and science, there are many parts of design that, science lags design. So we, as human beings, we build stuff, we've designed stuff, whether it's companies, whether it's buildings, the science sometimes lags it. Science follows up and builds the necessary underlying explanatory models and explanations for why those things work the way they work. So many good teachers, many good companies, many good, educators and entrepreneurs, they do this organically. Right. But again, if you ask them to distill the principles, how do they design the tasks? How do they design the interaction? How do they build cultures? You can probably get something out of it. But they're doing intuitively something that's, that is similar to that. Now we've, through experimental work and research, we've perhaps given it a language, we've given a model underlying it, we know exactly how you design it, and what happens if you don't design it this way versus the other. So this is kind of the science catching up in some sense to what comes intuitively to a number of people in a number of contexts.
That makes a lot of sense. And maybe since everyone's asking two questions, why the heck not? Which, in your experience, which company does productive failure the best in accordance to what you've studied?
I can't answer that question because I'm not that clued into the companies of the world and to be able to say which one's the best.
Is there a company that you profiled in your book that you're an admirer of?
No, I haven't.
No?
But you did mention that ETH spins off a lot of interesting startups that have gone on and done really well. I don't know if any of them have embedded this, but I would imagine.
Again, they don't even know about, many of them would not even know about the term productive failure, let alone the design of science. But your intuition, again, is probably right. That if you go and talk to them about it, they'll say, yeah, probably we went through this process, just not knowing that we did.
Thank you. Next question. Madhu?
You just talked about how productive failure is intuitively something entrepreneurs or people in academia have experienced and grown through it. How do you democratize the availability of productive failure, especially at a time when a lot of learning is happening online through availability of MOOCs? Is there a way to make this productive failure experience be available to a large number of people through things like massive open online courses?
Yeah, so massive open online courses, right? Their model of instruction largely tends to be the older default model. And so it's not really the medium or the way, it's really the underlying pedagogy that you're designing for. Same with GenAI. You can ask it for answers and it'll just give you the search does not lead to learning, right? The trick is how do you design this entire process when you first want to understand something new? And part of my vision for the next 5-10 years is to build this powerful learning model into educational technologies powered by AI that are not, when you ask them something, they're not just giving you the answers, they're taking you to through the process which places the bulk of the cognitive effort on you, making you fail and get to suboptimal places, and then take you into instruction. Now that is a huge training, like you have to train the models and you have to design it. But that is something that we can now do, which we couldn't do maybe 2 or 3 years ago even. And that's how you give access to, just about any kid in the world.
Sharon or Aisha?
Sorry. I have 2 questions. One is, how individual is this process? Is it something that teams go through together, or is it an individual learning process where you have to activate your own failure and the lessons are individual to you? And the second one is just, are there people for whom this doesn't work and for whom the ambiguity is too much and it actually shuts them down?
Great, very good questions, both of them. So we've done configurations where it's both individual and collaborative. There is a slight edge that collaborative engagement in failure has a stronger effect. The person that actually did the meta-analysis was my ex-doctoral student who is right behind you. So you should talk to him about that paper. That was a very influential paper. We've also done configurations where you can do first individual, then you bring that into the collaborative setting, and then you learn. So there are multiple possibilities for how you want to orchestrate this, right? Then are there, let's say, learner profiles where this may not work or it just doesn't work? There is no evidence. We've not collected any data in the special needs, very neurodivergent populations, so I can't speak to those at all. But there are cases where even within, say, let's say the mainstream, the bulk of the normal distribution, we tend to think that our ability to, react to failure or to be able to deal with frustration, to be able to deal with some emotions, to be able to deal with anxiety, some people can and others can't. The point of doing this is that unless you design safe experiences for people to experience frustration and these emotions and then normalize it for them, that's how they build the capacity to be able to develop, to be able to deal with it in the future. So then these properties we call resilience, persistence, emotional management, these are not just individual properties. It's not like you have it and you don't. It's the context interacting with you, and designing the context is up to us.
And then Sharon after that, sorry.
Would you say that learning goals are more important than performance goals for teenagers and young adults? Or is either more?
Yeah, look, we have to develop expertise. So, I guess learning goals are important when you're learning something new, but as teenagers or even young children, you're learning languages, you're learning motor skills, you're doing these things. Once you get to learn, you want to exploit it because that leads to more learning. So at any stage, you're exploiting what you know and taking it in new directions, building more and more expertise, because that gives you access to more new learning contexts. And other times you're just engaged in learning the new thing. So I guess throughout the learning trajectory, you have both of these goals present. What we don't have sort of punctuate is we're not very good at knowing where we are. So sometimes your child may be in the learning zone and you're expecting the performance goal, well, good luck, right? And vice versa. So again, having those conversations just gives you a good sort of frame to talk to people about it.
I'm just going to build on a few questions and responses. I guess there's a psychological shift required, right? And if you're used to a performance culture, and if you don't want your children to fail, you want them to fail in certain situations, but not in an academic situation. I guess what is your guidance on the shift that is required there as an individual or as a parent to enable productive failure?
So two things. So the productive failure is, not that you're suggesting this, it's not about being okay with failure when the stakes are high, like the exams. And we all want our kids to do well there. In spite of the limitations and interpretability of all these exams, we still want them to do very well there. The proposition of productive failure, and actually I've worked with teachers with precisely this question, is can I use failure in initial learning when the stakes are low so that I learn deeply? Did I say something wrong? Right? When the stakes are low, and that makes me learn the material deeply so that the chances of failure when the stakes are high actually are low. Now that is an argument that I found teachers really buy into. And as parents also. You can buy it. So you're really investing up front to derive the benefit, and not all failure is equal. And I think that's one of the things I really want to clarify. I'm not saying all kinds of failure is equal. Some really is not, but other can be very,
Can
very
you say that
nice.
line again? I think it's a wonderful line.
Not all failure is equal.
No, not that one.
Which one?
When the stakes are high.
Right, yeah, so I'll say the whole thing. So use failure when the stakes are low to learn deeply so that the chances of failure when the stakes are high are low.
Hi. So Resh, Shiv, absolutely amazing. You guys are hosting this, and Professor Kapur, thank you very much. I think as I understand it, you are talking about three different types of failures. One is, of course, the failures that you have in real life, and we all learn from that. Then there is tolerance for failure. A lot of organizations have that. But what you are talking about is essentially designing failures. And you talk about how you are going to use AI to design sort of failures that help us learn. Now, I was wondering whether, say, this means something like you have your chat GPT and you are designing your customize a chat GPT for your child who is trying to understand a subject, where you are essentially saying that, okay, try to lead the child in 10 different ways, in 10 different directions, but don't give an answer. Is it, I mean, is that what you mean by it?
Part of it, yes. I mean, that's the correct intuition, right? So we've done experimental research where we give students the suboptimal solutions and get them to engage with those and try to we call it learning from vicarious failure. But we've done this in behavioral experiments. We also want to be able to design. So that will definitely be one design element where a child is learning with productive failure technologies, basically. Definitely.
I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions. One right here.
Hi, Manu, Professor Kapur.
Oh, please.
I've been thinking to say that since we were university students. Okay, I've got a couple of questions, but I think I have 2 that is close to my heart. I think what I wanted to ask was just following with the last question, in our culture of performance anxiety, Singaporeans, what is the time taken in your research for productive failure type learning versus current normal learning? That's for maybe children, because intuitively it may seem longer for the deep learning to occur. And I put a background to it. It's like I'm a surgeon, and surgeons, the doctors, actually we plan for productive failure. Don't be scared. In the junior time when we did appendectomies, when I did appendectomy, we did it alone. The seniors around and they expect you to fail, but they come and rescue you when you cut something not so vital. No, it's true. This is in our curriculum, but it's not said about a lot. But the question is, the time taken for this deep learning is difficult to quantify, and we learned a lot. The current learning for surgeons are, you do this, tick all the check boxes, and okay, you're all that. But they all cannot operate. You see, so really, in society, we want things fast, and we want things, but the deep learning takes longer. And does it really take longer in your research? That's my number 1 question. Number 2 question is acceptance of productive failure in the scoring system. So for example, what you mentioned about when it's not so important for performance, can half the semester be all about how you do well in failure? The more you fail, you score higher. Then the next semester for children, you do the performance and you score. I mean, I'm looking at it in that perspective. That may be the way to sell it, but I don't know how to sell it to Singaporean parents for children, for productive failure. So this is 2 questions. Sorry for a long story. Thank you.
The second part will just come to you through the app. Huh? You won't even know that it's happening to your kids, and they will be learning very deeply. Okay, so thanks, June. June and I, by the way, go back 30 years, right?
And more. Yeah.
And more, yeah, 32, 33 years. So we went to college together at NUS.
Are you going to reveal his insurance provider?
No, I'm going to go and check mine. So time. So, okay, from the scientific experimental standpoint, June, we have to keep time, effort, all those things same so that the results are comparison. I mean, that's basic experimental design. But we've done some implementation research where we have shown, even with a very small surgical, sorry to use the metaphor, surgical intervention, you can achieve huge benefits. Let me give you one example. Again, back to maths. ETH has ETH Zurich. It is a system where if you get your grade Matura, your 12th grade qualifications, then you are free to enter the university. We can't deny you entry. But staying is very hard. So in the first year, about 55% of the population just has to leave because the standard is very hard, as in comparison to other places where hard to get into, but then easier to stay in, right? And one of the hardest courses in this program is this abstract linear algebra course, which is very, very tough. 45% of the students fail it every year. And they keep the level at that because they want to sort of get rid of, right? We designed an 8-hour intervention spread over the year, the entire year, just 8 hours, surgically before each key topic. How much would you think the passing rate changed, if at all, based on an 8-hour intervention throughout the year on a course that lasts hundreds of hours over the course of the year, and historically whose passing rate has been kept at about 55%?
80%.
Oh, you are greedy. No. Look, 80%. So we moved to 75%. Right? A very, very good teacher could probably shift it to 60. We moved it to 75. I mean, that created a host of other problems because now more people are staying doing this too, right? But imagine if you could. So to answer your question, it does take a little bit more time, but it can be done in a very surgical way as well.
One last question, guys. Okay, right here.
Yes, of course.
How do you motivate yourself or someone after failure to make it productive?
Yeah, motivation. Again, motivation is another one of the things that it's not something you have and you don't. It's something you can build over time, right? So again, and if you experience failure in a harsh way, then that is sometimes not good for your motivation. Although in athletics, in sport, there is a saying that you don't mess with the best player on the other team, because if you get him motivated, they'll take the game away, right? The Virat Kohli effect and so on and so forth. So the first is that you really have to experience the failure in a safe way. Second is you just have to have there's a phenomenon called the sunk cost fallacy. You know, what failure does is it puts your investment, right, that you've already invested in it, and therefore you continue with it. So think of productive failure as the positive spin on that. The fact that you've invested in it, now can you bootstrap that to learn something new? If you just leave it as that, you won't learn anything. But if there's a mechanism by which you can extract something good out of that failure, then that starts to motivate. Because the next time that you are in that space, you know, this is going to happen. I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to get failed, but I will extract something out of it, right? So very simply put, you know, and that requires a lot of reflection, adaptation, and then, of course, correct knowledge or expert interaction, right? Because when you compare what you've done with what an expert or expert, that contrast, and we didn't talk about it, but that contrast is key. So, you know, failure gives, when you struggle with failure, that builds the potential, reflection builds the potential to learn from failure, and the contrast turns that failure into insight.
Fantastic. So we'll end on that note, and I hope you all had some nice takeaways. I think for one thing for sure, think hard about how you're going to design productive failure into your organizations, with your kids, in your life in general, and see what comes out on the other side. So with that, please join me in thanking Professor Manu Kapur.